Okay, on Tuesday, Celtic released a pretty positive set of financial figures. They were the PLC annual results for the year ended June the 30th, 2022. These were the key takeaways. Revenue is up to 88.2 million. Player sales were 29 million. Transfer spend is now a whopping 38.4 million, and there's 30.2 million in the bank. So I covered that yesterday. I want to take a deeper look at things, and the international break seems a pretty good time to do that. So today we're chatting to Kieran Canning, who's a football correspondent for AFP based in Manchester, and he also covers money in sport. Kieran, I saw you tweeting about this yesterday. The upshot seems that the numbers are pretty good from a Celtic point of view.
Yeah, I think on the broad take of it, you would say the numbers are very good given the circumstances of a year where Celtic pretty much rebuilt the squads entirely. When you look at the thing that jumped out to me first and foremost was the transfer spends, which I'm pretty sure would be a record for Celtic in a 12-month period to spend the best part of £40 million. But one of the things just to be aware of on that is that these are the figures for July the 1st last year to June the 30th this year. So it's a 12-month period rather than specifically a season. And given the way that both last summer and this summer went, last summer, because of the slow start in the market, pretty much all the signings, Kyogo, Starfelt, Giacomakis, Juranovic, Abada, all the sort of significant money was spent in this period that we're talking about. So after July the 1st last year. And the major transfer fees from this summer were before June the 30th. So Carter Vickers, Jota, and Bernabei. So really the only thing that's not included in terms of what's been spent over the past couple of seasons is the Haksabanovic fee. Right. So that 38 million is taken across three windows really, last summer, January, and then this summer. So to have basically rebuilt the squad, spent that much money, which I might come on to a bit, is a bit geeky in terms of how it's worked out in the accounts and how things are amortized over the course of the contract. But that's, to have that sort of initial outlay and still make a profit in a season where Celtic didn't have Champions League football, which is another major point, is pretty encouraging.
Buying the league, 38 million to buy the Scottish Premiership title. That's what the rivals will say. I think the serious point is that it's self-sufficient, isn't it? Because, I mean, player sales for the same period are 29 million. But I think even prior to that, you'd have, Jeremy Frimpong leaving the club for, I think, over 10 million. So we've actually probably still brought in more money over the last couple of years, or the last 18 months than we've maybe spent. So it's not as if we're just spending money, we're bringing in money as well from selling players. And we have a squad there of, and people won't like me saying this, but really sellable assets, players that when they move on will net the club a fair chunk of money.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think one of the other major things to take away from, in terms of from looking forward from this set of accounts maybe to this time next year, is that at the moment, obviously, this year or this season, there hasn't been a significant sale, which is very much out of sync with recent years. I'm just having a quick look. I've got a sort of list here of the amounts that Celtic have brought in the past number of years. So 2018, so that's the season of 2017-18, 16 million. 2019, 17 million, 2020, 24 million. And then 2021 was down to 9.5 million, which is pretty much that Frimpong money you're talking about, and then back up to 29 million for the past year. So I think we can see going forward that there will be significant sales. Now, that's not to say it'll be in January, but I think this time next year we'll be talking about maybe one or two, or possibly even more, having gone in the summer. But in terms of the overall financial perspective, you would say that the club's in a very strong position on that, because if you look at 29 million from the best part of Edwards, Ayer, and a little bit of Christie going, plus bits and pieces for Bio and Hendry, which people have probably forgotten about. The Edward, Ayer, and Christie deals were all influenced by the fact that they all had just 1 year left in their contracts. So mean, we can look back in hindsight and say this was obviously the wrong decision, but the club made the decision to keep a hold of them going into what they hoped was the 10 in a row season, thinking it was better to hold on to their better players. That obviously didn't work out, but it meant that last summer the Celtic's hand was sort of weakened quite significantly because they all had just 1 year left in their contract. If you look at all the really sellable assets now, I think the minimum contract length is to 2025. So next summer they're still going to have 2 years left in their deal, and a lot of the other ones are 2026 or 2027. So I think like Carter Vickers, Juranovic, O'Reilly, Hatate are all 26, and Jota and Haksabanovic 27. Again, I think Hyogo is the only major one that's 2025, and even then, just because of his age and stuff, as good a player he is, he might not get as much money as selling a O'Reilly or Hatate or whatever. So from that point of view, I think there's clearly going to be sales down the line, but the fact that Celtic are in the Champions League this year, and will make significantly more from that than a season in the Europa League, which is what the club's kind of budgeted for and become used to over the past number of years. It's allowed them not to sell anyone this summer, knowing that they've got the Champions League money coming in. And I think in the hope that a lot of these guys will do well in the Champions League, or some of them go into the World Cup, and that because of that, their value is only going to increase in January or next summer. They'll be able to get even more money for them.
Yeah, I mean, the thing I'm taking away from all of that you're saying there is that Celtic just seem in a really strong position. We're holding all of the cards. We have no reason to sell, or we had no reason to sell any players this summer because we're going into the Champions League. And as you say, that's almost just a thing that keeps the ball rolling and adds value to these players. Whereas a year ago, we had these guys with a year to go.
Yeah, definitely. I think when we talk about the spends, it's easy to look at that and say, that's been money well spent, but that's because of, one, the players that they've got in, and two, the way that Andrew's best out of them. So, going back a couple of years, at the time when people like Barkas and Ayeti were signed, people probably thought, well, I remember the sort of tweets and stuff at the time, people thinking, this has been a great window, but it doesn't pan out like that because the players don't perform. So it's easy to look at it now and say, all these guys that they spent money on, like, Abada, O'Reilly, Hatate, their value is significantly greater now than it was when they were signed. But so much of that comes down to the management of them, and the development of them as players. So yeah, I think Ange has to take a huge amount of credit from that point of view. The only other thing, talking about the sort of hierarchy of the club, and talk about like Nicholson and things, the one positive I would say is that it's shown, these figures kind of show that despite the transition there's been over the past 18 months or so, with Lowell leaving, there'll be mixed views in the fan base about Lowell. But one thing that he was very good at was extracting very good value for Celtic's best players. And if you look at the fees that they got for Edwards and Ayer in particular, given the circumstances of their contract situation and stuff, I think you have to say the fees were very good in the circumstances. So I think that's positive looking forward, that despite the fact that Law was gone, I suppose we get a whole other argument is how much of his how much influence does he still have in the background, but that strength that he had, that he brought over the course of his period there, hasn't been lost.
Yeah. In terms of other things, you spoke about comparisons to last year being pretty meaningless, given that this time last year was obviously after a year of no fans at games.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, the one, if you want to call it worrying thing, but it's not unexpected, is that despite the increase in revenue back to kind of pre-COVID level of 88 million, pretty much exactly half of that comes from match day. So if you're comparing it to, obviously, the Premier League's the best example, but even like other major European leagues, I think the Premier League average is something like 13% of revenue comes from match day, compared to 50% for Celtic. Now, that's obviously because the TV money is so much greater in the Premier League, and not to the same degree as the Premier League, but in some other leagues in Europe. So Celtic are so heavily reliant on match day income. And one of the things that was interesting is that even if you look at another sort of controversial topic from the season a couple of years ago, was the fact that obviously people paid for season tickets and there was no refunds or anything, despite the fact they never actually got into the game. But just having a quick look at the figures, so last year the match day income was 21 million, which was basically because of the season ticket money that people paid, and then for last year it was 44.7. So even though they had that season ticket money, that shows the difference that selling things like Europa League games or Champions League games this year, which aren't included on the season ticket, all your like hospitality, all the extras of people buying stuff on match day in terms of like food and programs and all that kind of stuff, it all kind of adds up, and so it's quite a significant difference in terms of like from one season to the next, even though they kept that season ticket money from last year. So that's a bit why the comparing it to last year is a bit. Sorry, my dog's going a bit demented.
You're okay. Clearly a fan of Celtic's figures.
I know. He just wants my attention, doesn't he?
Yeah, as you say, this is up until the end of June, so Champions League money isn't included there, so we could be looking at an extra, anything up to 40 million really, including ticket sales.
Just one small thing on that. Yeah, it's not quite 100 million, like 40 million. I've heard a lot of people talk about the 40 million thing in terms of the raw figures comparing for Celtic one season to the next. Because it's 40 million, yes, to get in the Champions League, but you've got to bear in mind how much you get for in the Europa League, which isn't nothing. It's probably, once you add in prize money, match day, and all that kind of stuff, you're round about the 20 million mark. So it's probably about a 20 million difference. The one big thing, which we'll all be interested in over the next month or so, is prize money in terms of per point, and if Celtic go through to the last 16, it's significantly bigger in the Champions League. So you're looking at like €1 million a point, pretty much, plus the best part of €10 million as a bonus if you get through to the last 16. So that's going to make a massive difference depending on how those games, you would imagine, particularly against Leipzig in the home game against Shakhtar, go, because that's going to could make hypothetically Celtic, best case scenario, maybe get like 7 points from that, and that gets you through to the last 16. You're talking best part of €17 million from that. So it's a huge difference based on just a few games.
And it just shows how big how big a month it is, really, even away from the pitch in terms of the financials. We know there's a huge opportunity for Celtic to have regular Champions League football every season, basically, for the next few years. To be fair, it's the same for Rangers as well. If they win the league, and even if you don't win the league, as we found out this season in qualifying. Also, the new Champions League format is coming in 2024. Michael Nicholson spoke about this in the statement Celtic put out with the results. That offers 2 extra matches in, well, it's no longer a group stage, but the first phase of the competition. So I guess media rights are only just going to keep going up for the Champions League, and when you've got an extra home match, that's going to be more money as well.
Yeah, so I actually wrote about this yesterday, but the changes from 2024 make a massive difference. Celtic, if they take advantage of it, is always the big caveat. So the first thing to say is it's pretty much guaranteed, presuming there's not like a massive change in the way that UEFA does its access list for getting into the Champions League, that the winners of the Scottish League will get straight into the Champions League again next season. And as it stands, they'll be likely to get in again in 2024 when this new format begins.
And hopefully takes us to a level that when we do have to go through qualifying, we don't make an arse of it against Malmo and teams like that. Imagine we had a good TV deal, Kieran. Imagine Scottish football had sorted out a good TV deal, would be unbeatable.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's one of the other things to bear in mind. So obviously that's not going to change anytime soon now with the expected sort of extension of the Sky deal. So it makes making the most of all those other revenue streams talked about in terms of selling players, Champions League, even more important, because that sort of domestic TV deal side of things isn't going to change in the near future.
Just a final question for you. Me looking at these figures, you'll know far better than me, but obviously COVID was an extremely difficult period for every club. Celtic weren't, excluded from that. It seems to me like we've come through that pretty well and are now flourishing.
Yeah, and again, to go back to the Lowell years, if we call them that, I mean, he was often quite criticised for being quite overly conservative in terms of making sure there was cash in the bank, making sure Celtic were sustainable. But because of that, it meant that Celtic were much better set up to survive and get through COVID than maybe other clubs who run at a loss, continuously, or a lot of football clubs do, to be honest. So Celtic had that sort of like backup of funds to rely on through the COVID period. And also what I was saying about the match day thing, the fact that they did sell season tickets meant that match day wasn't zero, as it could have been, and it was. Like a lot of the Premier League clubs, for example, just didn't sell season tickets or refunded season tickets. So if you can imagine, that would have been an extra 20 million hit on top of what it was. Managed to mitigate the effects of COVID a bit. But yeah, it certainly was a massive factor for clubs, like I was saying before, that are so heavily reliant on match day, because if you were in the Champions League or the Premier League clubs, whatever, could rely on that TV money still coming in. But Scottish clubs were really hit hard by it. So from that point of view, I think you do have to look at it and say, like, at least now Celtic are back on a footing that they were pre-COVID, and hopefully with Champions League money coming in, a lot of very sellable assets that. It's one of my bugbears, I have to say. Maybe it's because of someone that looks at the finances as a football fan more than most, that people have this real thing about you don't want to sell players. But I think last summer shows that how positive I think selling players is. As long as you spend the money well that you get in, selling one or two players and buying 3 or 4 of a comparable or a better standard can be very positive. And you still, Celtic basically selling 3 key players in Edward Dyer and Christie, and buying the whole team off the back of it. So selling 1 or 2 next summer, I wouldn't be scared of, as long as I say that the money is reinvested in the right way.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think it's selling the right players at the right time. Kieran, it's been amazing. I'll let you get back to your dog. What's its name?
Bryn. He's clearly what he is the most sociable dog you ever see. So he clearly wanted a bit of limelight for himself on the on the chat.
I'm disappointed. I thought his name was going to be Postacoglu or something like that. So we'll let that one go. But Kieran, thanks so much for coming on for a chat, and we'll maybe catch up again in the future.
No problem, Hamish.
Thanks everyone for watching this. Just to let you know, we are going to have a couple of days without videos over the next week period. I'm actually away to Liverpool on Saturday. I know, another holiday, so apologies. John and Stevie are going to do a live show on Sunday, I believe, and then I'll be back kind of middle of next week to start the look ahead to Motherwell and cover any other news. So we shall chat to you then.